I see you. Get in here. Don't walk away, the Don's talking to you. Get in here, kid. Have a seat. Just so happens I need to talk to you anyway. First off, you doing okay? Of course you are. You're above ground, you're still breathing, and here I am with a brand new video just for you, just for Valentine's Day. Now I know Valentine's Day was a few days ago, but the Don loves you the other 364 days too. Just not in that way. I am engaged after all. I meant platonic, you know? But enough of that, let's get down to business. Today, we're going to talk about cancel culture. No, not your favorite celeb or YouTuber getting dog walked on social media for saying something stupid. I meant canceled video games. Games get canceled all the time for many different reasons. Maybe it got derailed by controversy. Maybe the publishers kept sticking their nose in. Too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say. Maybe the developers ran out of time, money, or resources. Or maybe the game just wasn't shaping up to be what it was supposed to be. Sometimes the cancellation's for the best. And sometimes the unused assets get repurposed into something better. Or maybe the game would have been so bad that the gaming public just ended up dodging a bullet. And of course, you've got that one snarker who's going to come into the comments talking about games that were so bad they should have been canceled. That's another story for another time. Nevertheless, it's always painful to see a game get canceled. Fans were looking forward to playing it, the developers put their heart and soul into it, and publishers were hoping to get a return on their investments. So with that, today we're going to take a look at 10 canceled video games. Some you might know about, others you don't. By the way, I just know that I'm going to do a follow-up to this video at some point. So if there's something that you think I missed, that's what the comment section's for. This is a team effort after all, that's why I call it a mafia. But let's get this thing started. Thrill Kill is a fighting game for up to 4 players that was set to be released on the PlayStation 1 in 1998. The game was developed by Paradox Interactive, not to be confused with the publisher behind Stellaris, Crusader Kings, and City Skylines. Playing as one of several fighters who have died and been sent to hell, your job is to battle the others in order to earn a chance at reincarnation. The characters include a dominatrix, a dwarf with surgically implanted stilts, and a hillbilly cannibal. The game contained a heavy emphasis on blood, gore, and sexual content, and of course, it also contained fatalities. If it hadn't been for WWF Warzone, the game would have been the first 4-player fighting game on the PlayStation. Originally, the game was set to be titled Earth Monster, which was based on an ancient Mayan game which was similar to basketball. However, Virgin Interactive, the game's would-be publisher, demanded that the developers make it more violent. Therefore, the gameplay and the theme were changed drastically. At one point, the game had an adults-only rating. However, this would prevent most retailers from being able to carry the game. The violence was then toned down so the game would achieve a mature rating. During the game's development, however, EA would acquire Virgin Interactive along with most of its assets, including Thrill Kill. However, rather than publish the game themselves, EA would shelve it. They wouldn't even sell it to another publisher. At one point, Eidos Interactive was interested in publishing the game themselves. Of course, keep in mind this was during the era of politicians such as Hillary Clinton and Joe Lieberman attacking video game violence. Out of all the entries on this list, this one's cancellation makes me the most angry. The game wasn't canceled because it wasn't up to snuff, it was canceled because EA wanted to cozy up with politicians who are against video game violence and making a career out of it. I can understand if EA didn't want to be associated with the game themselves, but by not allowing another publisher to put out the game, they decided to play Big Brother and make a decision for us rather than let us choose for ourselves whether we find the game appropriate. The game does live on in a way. As many good Buccaneers know, a mostly complete version of the game is floating around the internet, and it's not hard to find if you know where to look. I mean, this is the internet. Google, Bing, Yahoo, Ask Jeeves. In the more legal department, the game's engine was used in the more polished Wu-Tang Shaolin style, while a two-player version of the engine was used for its X-Men Mutant Academy fighting games. The developers themselves would go on to be acquired by Midway Games, where they'll be renamed Midway Los Angeles and work on games such as Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks and TNA Impact before Midway was shut down in the late 2000s. Like I said, the game is floating around there, and while I think it's pretty decent, there are some people who think that we kinda dodged the bullet. Anyway, check it out for yourself. Marvel Chaos was a collaboration between Marvel Comics and EA Chicago, who you know from Fight Night. The game will be a follow-up to Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects. Well, maybe not so much a follow-up as it is an apology. The PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 game would have heroes such as Captain America, Spider-Man, and the Hulk do battle in interactive and destructible 3D arenas. During the game's development, developer EA Chicago was shut down and the game would eventually be cancelled. Kudos to Noda, the head of EA Chicago, would eventually be let go as well. While no reason was outright given, the failure of Def Jam Icon likely had a lot to do with that. Footage from Marvel Chaos will leak online thanks to PTOP Online, and a playable build of the game can be found if you know where to look. Matter of fact, that's how I got the video footage that you're watching now. It was sad to see this game canceled because I would have loved to see what EA and Marvel had planned. Obviously this prototype has issues, but even here you can see the direction that EA was going in, and the finished product will likely have been something special. Though I kinda like to think that part of the decision to cancel the game would have likely been to quality issues. After all, sacking EA Chicago after Def Jam Icon makes about as much sense as paying Colin Kaepernick $25 million to play as an outside linebacker and then sacking him after one game because his stops weren't up to his passing skills. Especially since, one, I didn't think that Def Jam Icon was all that bad, and two, this is the same company that also created Fight Night, which is hands down one of the best boxing franchises in existence. I'll talk more about Def Jam Icon in another video because obviously that wasn't cancelled. But the cancellation of Marvel Chaos might have been a blessing in disguise, as this opened the door for Marvel vs. Capcom 3. As far as Marvel games from EA, they have games that are coming out that are based on Black Panther and Iron Man, so depending on the quality, then this isn't too much of a huge loss. So I can hear you now. Wait a minute, Don, didn't this game come out last year? Well, yes it did, but before its release, it spent years in limbo. The current version that's available now was rebuilt from scratch, although the development team is headed by the same president. For the purpose of this entry, and because I want an excuse to talk about this game, I'm treating the previous version of the game as a separate product. Anyway, as you probably guessed from the title, 6 Days in Fallujah takes place during the Second Iraq War. Developed by Atomic Games, the game would do away with the Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer movie-style action of games like Call of Duty, instead presenting a more realistic and strategic take on modern combat. According to the developers, the game was more of a survival horror game rather than a straight-up military shooter. The horror in this case will come from the insurgent attacks and their unpredictability. According to interviews, the developers were trying to capture the psychological toll that the war took on Marines while still keeping the game fun. From the jump off, the game was met with controversy and protest, whether it was from pundits on both the left and the right, Iraqi civilians, or even some of the servicemen themselves. The developers were accused of either glorifying or making light of the war. Konami would pull out, leaving the game without a publisher. At one point, Sony Santa Monica Studio, the creators of God of War, were working on the game, and Sony themselves were apparently going to publish it as a PlayStation 3 exclusive title. This was revealed in a tweet from David Jaffe about his former boss, Alan Becker. It's unknown the extent of the involvement Sony had with the game, or if this was before or after Konami pulled out. In 2012, Atomic Games president Peter Tomte confirmed the game was still in development. However, since then, news on the game had went in the dark until another announcement from Tomte in 2018 saying that the game was still in development. And of course, 2021 rolled around when it was announced that the game was being developed by Highway Games and published by Victora, which was a new company developed by Tomte. After a few delays, the game was released in early access last year, but that's another story. Now, I'm of two minds on this entry, and this is one of those instances where I can see both sides. Video games as a medium has the ability to let its players experience issues in a way that's unmatched by movies, TV, or books. It's one thing to read about current events, but it's another to see and play them up close. And if video games are to truly advance as a proper storytelling medium, they have to be able to tackle controversial issues, albeit in a tasteful manner. That last part is especially important because I just know someone is going to misread my statement and use it to justify stupid edgelord shit like hatred and those dumbass Alex Jones and Bolsonaro games that you can get on Steam. Now, from what was being said by the developers, the game isn't about the justifications for the war, just a look into what happened when boots hit the ground. Now, on the flip side, this game is clearly a case of too much too soon. It's one thing to make a video game about World War II or Vietnam because the player base will be too young to have participated in or been impacted by those wars, other than maybe knowing a family member or loved one who did. However, this game is about a war that was still going on throughout the game's development. Yes, I know about the mission accomplished banner, but come on, you're smarter than that. Now, I know that this is going to hit home for a lot of people, especially those who are injured or even lost loved ones in the conflict. I can see the potential negative impact that this could have on people. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether the game is right or the game is wrong. I'm just here to drop the facts along with my observations. On a side note though, I find it rather humorous that the keep politics out of games crowd was all too eager to play this game once they first heard about it. I mean, just saying, fam. Phantom Dust was a planned reboot of the original Xbox cult classic that was a mashup of deck building and arena action. The game was being developed by Darkside Games, who had worked on games such as BioShock 2, Spec Ops: The Line, and Borderlands. You might not have heard of them, however. They were mostly a studio that bigger developers and publishers would outsource work to, but this would be their first game that they had their name on. There's actually a story behind this one, and it's the usual story about tight deadlines and executive interference. There's a Kotaku article that goes more in depth about this. I'll link to it in the description, but I'll sum it up here. The TLDR is that in 2013, Microsoft bought on Darkside to help resurrect a dormant property of their choosing. Candidates included Perfect Dark and Battletoads. They chose Phantom Dust, which would be rebooted as a multiplayer-only title. Keep in mind, however, that the original game had a deep single-player campaign and storyline. The game would be announced in E3 of 2014 with the famous CG trailer. However, this caught the team off guard as it used none of their assets that were mentioned in any of the gameplay, and it didn't even mention them as the game's developer. Microsoft would insist on additional features, including a 6-hour single-player campaign. However, the team needed more money and resources. The plug would be pulled quietly in 2015. The official word from Microsoft was that the project is in limbo, but unless you know something I don't, we can mark this up as cancelled. This is another one that's very disappointing to see, as the original Phantom Dust was a cult classic, and it's one of the few Japanese developed games for the Xbox platform. Scalebound, another Japanese developed Xbox One exclusive, was also cancelled around this time, and this really hurt the Xbox brand. If both these games were done right, they would have given Xbox gamers some quality exclusives, and it would have given Microsoft some much needed pull in the Japanese market. Then again, a multiplayer only game isn't exactly the best way to bring back the series. Thankfully, Yukio Futasugi, the creator behind the original Phantom Dust, is still on good terms with Microsoft, and Phil Spencer said that the game was one of his favorites. So with all the new studios under Microsoft, no doubt there's someone there who can pick up the reins. For now, the original game received a free-to-play remaster on both PC and Xbox One, so if you never played this game before, now is a great time to check it out and see what was so amazing about it. As its name suggests, Command & Conquer 2 is a sequel to Command & Conquer Generals. The new title would go back to the series' roots of base building and resource gathering after the poor reception to Command & Conquer 4. It would be built using the Frostbite engine, which was the tech behind the Battlefield games. The game's single-player campaign would involve 3 factions: the European Union, the Global Liberation Army, and the Asian Pacific Alliance, as they engage in an all-out war after a terrorist attack. Wait. Hold up. 1 second. What? Okay. I guess I'm gonna have to scratch all that. Alright, let's start this over. A multiplayer-only Reboot, Command & Conquer would be a free-to-play game which would utilize microtransactions. The new title would go back to the series' roots of base building and resource gathering after the poor reception to Command & Conquer 4. It would be built using the Frostbite engine, which was the tech behind the Battlefield games. The game would have no single-player campaign at launch. So this was another interesting one. In 2011, a game was teased as being the next big BioWare franchise. At the 2011 Spike Video Game Awards, this game was revealed as Command & Conquer Generals 2, which was in development from Victory Games, which had been renamed to BioWare Victory. A somewhat puzzling move for sure, but I guess it made sense. At the time, the developers, and that's BioWare themselves mind you, were riding high on the success of both Dragon Age and Mass Effect. In 2012, the game will be renamed to Command & Conquer and will be a reboot, with Victory Games dropping BioWare from their name at some point. The game would still utilize the assets from Generals 2, however. Customers who bought Command & Conquer the Ultimate Collection will receive beta keys. However, the game will launch without a campaign mode. This news was met with serious backlash from longtime fans, myself included, as the campaigns in the previous games were a huge part of the series, especially the live-action cinematics. I mean, who can forget Joseph Kukin as Kane? This caused EA and Victory to backpedal and promise that single-player campaigns will be added sometime down the road. Eventually, the game will be cancelled in 2013, at least the current version of it, due to negative reaction to the closed alpha test, and Victory Games will be shut down along with it. EA would later state that the game was in development under a new studio. In 2014, EA was still looking for a new developer for the game, while confirming that people who bought the Ultimate Collection would still receive beta keys. Again, however, that was in 2014, and as you know, the very next Command & Conquer game was the 2018 mobile game Command & Conquer Rivals, and after that was the 2020 remaster of the original game and Red Alert. So again, unless you know something that I don't, either this game was cancelled or EA forgot about it. So this is one of those rare times that EA realized that they weren't giving players what they wanted. Remember, this was during a time the publisher was cannibalizing itself and veering toward live services and mobile, and some people say that they're still doing that, although it's not as bad as it previously was. Now, as sad as I am to see the cancellation of this game, because Generals was one of my favorite games in the series, it was clearly for the best. In the meantime, however, if you want a real Command & Conquer game, the aforementioned remaster is there, and Tempest Rising is dropping later this year, and it's probably going to be the closest we'll ever get to a new Command & Conquer. Mega Man Universe was an all-new 2.5D reimagining of Mega Man 2. Not only would players play as the Blue Bomber, but they could also play as Ryu from Street Fighter, Arthur from Ghouls and Ghosts, and even a version of Mega Man that was based on the bad box art from the original game. Additional characters would also be included as downloadable content. You can also customize your own character, and a level editor would also have been included. So basically, this was Mega Man meets Little Big Planet. The game would have come to the Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation 3 network in 2011. From the jump off, it was clear that the game's development was all over the place, and for the longest time it was unsure what the game was supposed to be. Eventually, producer Keiji Inafune confirmed that the game was intended to be an online platform for Mega Man fans with a focus on creativity and customization. The game was shown off at the Tokyo Game Show and New York Comic Con in late 2010. Opinions from the showings noted issues with the gameplay. Also, people took issue with the game's art style. In March of 2011, Capcom officially pulled the plug on the game, stating that the game just wasn't up to standards, but it was clear that there was something more to it than that. There's an excellent video from Gaming Historian that goes over the game's development in full, and I'll link to it in the description. There's a lot to it, and it's too much to go through all of it in this segment. But the short version is that Keiji Inafune and Capcom were butting heads due to his views on Japanese game development, clashing with Capcom's own views on Western studios and globalization. Basically, Inafune felt that Japanese game developers, including Capcom, were behind the times and needed to catch up to the West, while Capcom, at least in Japan, weren't too thrilled about the notion of collaborating with Western game developers. This would lead to Inafune's departure in 2010, leaving the game without any real direction and with Capcom having to outsource the work. Eventually, Capcom would cut their losses the following March with the cancellation. So this game's cancellation came at a time when Capcom was basically dumping all over the Mega Man franchise. Keep in mind, Universe wasn't even the only Mega Man game that was cancelled. Mega Man Legends 3, along with a first-person reimagining of Mega Man X, were also cancelled, and I'm sure there's more, but these are the only two I can think of off the top of my head. It would have been nice to see what Capcom was cooking. Mega Man with a level editor is a genius combination, as Mega Man Powered Up on the PSP proved. Maybe we can see some of the game's ideas in a future Mega Man game. Or at the very least, get a remaster of Mega Man Powered Up. Come on Capcom, we got Ace Attorney, we got Ghost Trick, let's get Mega Man Powered Up here. Fear and Respect was a collaboration between rapper Snoop Dogg, Midway Games, and the legendary film director John Singleton. Developed by Edge of Reality and intended for Xbox and PlayStation 2, and later Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, Fear and Respect would see players take control of Goldie, who is played by Snoop Dogg. The game takes place in South Central. It would see the player battle rival gangs. The game would feature a Fear and Respect system in which the player's actions would determine how allies and enemies would act toward them. Think of it as an early version of the Paragon Renegade system from Mass Effect. John Singleton was brought into the project early on to assist with the writing, and Paramount Pictures even acquired the film rights to the game. After going radio silent for some time, with even talks of a next-gen version, this being the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 glow-up, the project was unexpectedly cancelled in early 2006 along with the movie rights. No reason was given, but if this statement that then Midway CEO David Zucker gave to GameSpot indicates anything, the company might have been wary of the massive amount of Grand Theft Auto clones that were in the market at the time. I think we're at a juncture in the video game business. Everyone's talking about it. How many times are you going to give me the 16th iteration of, I'm not even going to talk about the other products. The 20th iteration of a driving game isn't going to keep the industry growing. So yeah, it sounds a lot like Zucker was wary about the amount of thugsploitation games that rose up in the wake of the success of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. This is a shame too, because if this game was done right, it could have been a perfect counterpoint to games like, say, 25 to Life, Beat Down Fist of Vengeance, and True Crime. Remember, at this time, Midway had been on a hot streak. They had a strategy of revamping old IP and creating new ones. While this produced a number of duds, it also gave us some of the company's best games in decades. Psyops, The Suffering, and the Mortal Kombat 3D games. John Singleton was the name behind classic urban cinema such as Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, and Boys in the Hood, which this game was clearly inspired by. And oh yeah, he also did the first 4 seasons of Snowfall before his untimely passing. As for Snoop Dogg, who doesn't love Uncle Snoop? Like the meme said, he completed the main game and is working on the side quest. So in 2019, Snoop expressed an interest in reviving the game, but we haven't heard anything about it since. Perhaps with his new Death Row Games label, we might see the thing come to life in some form. Published by EA as a follow-up to WCW Backstage Assault, WCW Mayhem 2 would have seen developer Aki return once again to WCW video games after 1998's WCW NWO Revenge. The game would feature over 1,000 moves, a career mode with a branching storyline, and new match types such as a gauntlet and first blood. No doubt the game would feature a large selection of then current WCW superstars, including Goldberg, Diamond Dallas Page, and Kevin Nash. Something that at the time no one expected: Vince McMahon's purchase of WCW. With World Championship Wrestling no longer existing as anything more than a part of the WWE tape library, any merchandising deals that the company had, including the game, were cancelled. Thankfully, the game lived on in some form, as the assets that Aki developed for the game were used in EA's Def Jam Vendetta. So does Aki have bad timing or what? This is yet another one of those things where I would love to have seen what WCW was cooking up, even if the TV product at the time was crap. Somewhere out there's an alternate universe where WCW Mayhem 2 was not only released, but the profits made from the game made WCW enough money to keep the company afloat until Eric Bischoff was able to find new investors and reboot the company as he had planned to do so. I'd tell you more about that, but this is a gaming channel, not a wrestling channel. But for now, I guess this is yet another blessing in disguise, as this game's death led to the creation of the Def Jam games. Silent Hills was an all-new entry in Konami's horror franchise. The game would have seen Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro direct the game, with Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead playing as the main character. According to a tweet from Del Toro, horror manga artist Junji Ito would also have been involved with the project. The game's existence was revealed via a PlayStation 4 download, which was known as PT. This later turned out to stand for Playable Teaser. To be accurate, it's a playable teaser for the new game. The game would be cancelled in April 2015 for unknown reasons. Worse yet, the playable teaser was removed from the PlayStation Store, and the only way you can access it is if you had already downloaded it before it was removed. As to the reason why the game was cancelled, all signs were pointing out to a falling out between Hideo Kojima and Konami, as Kojima would part ways with the company shortly before the release of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Also, Konami seemed to be going in a different direction when it came towards its IP.
namely pachinko, mobile games, and live services. There's a video from Super Bunny Hop that came out around the time that did a great job speculating on the situation. I'll post it in the description if I can find it. But hey, fuck it, right? Who'd want a new Silent Hill game from Hideo Kojima and one of horror's best directors, right? Now, for many old heads such as myself who remember the old Konami and grew up with it, this was pretty much the turning point. Their product had been in decline for years, but again, this was the breaking point. Not only did they dick over a legendary developer, at least as far as what we on the outside saw it, they cancelled what would have potentially been a new beginning for the Silent Hill series. Sadly, Silent Hill was just one of many franchises that they were wasting. Take Castlevania for instance. I mean, Netflix, Nintendo, and Dead Cells have done more with the property than Konami has these recent years. At least up until the 2019 compilation. And don't even get me started on Contra and Gradius. Now, these days, it looks like Konami has actually been making games again, or at least trying to capitalize off its IPs in a way that makes sense. These past few years have seen compilations and remasters such as the aforementioned Castlevania collection and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection from 2022. We also have several new Silent Hill games in development. Silent Hill 2 Remake, and of course Silent Hill F, which looks pretty promising. Not only that, there's the free short entry that was released on PlayStation 5 this past week. They even brought back the obscure Famicom game Getsu Fumaden. So while we may never see Silent Hills, hopefully this can lead to a new beginning for the series. But jury's still out.
This is pretty much what it says. An NES game based on the 1987 horror film. This game is notable for a number of reasons. Obviously, this was a game based on a horror movie on the NES at a time when Nintendo was tough on video games with religious content. Also, the game was developed by Color Dreams. Color Dreams was one of the biggest producers of unlicensed NES games, most of which, quite frankly, were crap. You're probably more familiar with their sub-label, Wisdom Tree, which was a label formed to produce Christian video games. By the way, I'll be giving Color Dreams their own video at some point. Finally, the game would utilize what was called a super cartridge, which had an external processor that could enhance the NES's graphics, while alerting the NES's own processor. This would allow for visual effects that were unheard of on the NES at the time. There wasn't much information about the game's mechanics, or even what kind of game it would have been. The project was killed early on when it was discovered that the super cartridge needed to run it would be too expensive to produce. There was also the fact that being a publisher of unlicensed games, Color Dreams would have a difficult time getting the game on the store shelves as it is, so the effort to mass produce the cartridge would go to waste. Advertisements for the game mentioned versions for Sega Genesis and Atari Lynx, but obviously those too were cancelled. Thus, Pinhead wouldn't appear in an official video game until he was included as one of the killers in Dead by Daylight. There was also talks of a PC version of the game that utilized the Wolfenstein 3D engine. This was on the heels of Super Noah's Ark, a Super Nintendo game that also utilized the engine. However, not a whole lot was known about this version of the game, other than the fact that it would have been a first-person shooter, obviously. Around this time, however, Doom was being released, and another horror-themed FPS game would just be seen as a ripoff. Also, the licensing rights to Hellraiser were expiring around this time, so Color Dreams decided to cut their losses. Now, you may have seen multiple videos of what was claimed to be the prototype for the game, and it's likely that these are just Hellraiser-themed mods for games like Doom and Wolfenstein. As a matter of fact, when asked about the possibility of the prototype, at least of the NES game, Color Dreams founder Dan Lawton had this to say. The hardware was done, and the artwork was 20% done. There was no programming, it was a 45-degree down-angle view with a maze of stone and walls and pits. Even given Color Dreams' reputation, it would have been cool to see what they were cooking up.
But then again, would a game based on an R-rated horror franchise be the kind of thing you would expect from a company called Color Dreams? And again, given their reputation, would they be able to do the license justice? After all, this is the same company that gave you Bible Adventures, and this was around the same time that the company started doing Bible-themed games. And while the supercard sounded like a good idea in theory, it was also a surefire waste of money at too late of a time. Remember, this was 1991, and the Super Nintendo was hitting American store shelves. And with the licensing fees for Hellraiser, this would be a huge money sink for any game publisher, even more so for one that was making unlicensed products. Still, like a lot of the games on this list, you have to wonder about what would have been. Who knows, maybe again there's an alternate universe where not only did Color Dreams produce their Hellraiser game, they're still around to this day putting out revolutionary products. That's it for this video. If you made it this far, I want you to go into the comments section and give me the name of a canceled video game that you wanted to play the most, regardless of if I mentioned it in this video or not. For me, that game is Scalebound. That game had so much potential, and as an Xbox gamer, I really needed this game. The only reason I didn't mention it in this video is because the Flophouse Files already did a video about this, and it turned out much better than anything I could have done. By the way, Phil Spencer, on the off chance you're watching this video, please let Platinum Games revive the game. They want to do it, the fans want to play it, it's a no-brainer, fam. Anyway, enough of that. If you enjoyed this video, and I know you did, make sure you like and you share it. If you're new to the channel, I like to cover retro games, indie titles, and cool game-related hardware. I'll do everything from reviews, to previews, to documentaries, to unboxings, and even lists just like the one you just finished watching. If that sounds good to you and you want to join the Mafia, hit that subscribe button, I'll make you a made man. As a matter of fact, if you want to do me one better, hit that bell icon and you'll be the first to know whenever I drop a new video. And if you want to find me on social media, my link tree is in the description below. You'll find links to my Instagram, TikTok, and even my podcast, which is on hiatus, but I'll be bringing back really soon. Like I said before, I'll be doing a part 2 to this video at some point. Maybe even a part 3 or 4 if there's demand for it. For right now though, I want to shift focus to games I hope don't get cancelled. My 20 for 2024 contains a list of 20 games that are coming out this year that I have my eye on. If you want to check it out, the link is on your screen right now. Until next time, I'm Audi 51,000G, kinfolk.